You've won nothing.
In my last video on the Owl House, I made the remark that I would only view all the content with Luz and Amity as a positive if they got together a significant amount of time before the series finale and stayed together. This struck a nerve with some people, and there was a consistent refrain from the audience of let things develop naturally and slowly. You want to know the problem with that? You can only choose one of those. One of my biggest positives about the Owl House is that it has really good pacing. Everything moves at a good speed and nothing feels dragged out. I expressed hope that this would also apply to the resident romantic subplot of Luz and Amity. As much as I find Amity to be underwhelming, I don't object to these two being a thing. In fact, they're kinda cute. But this statement was met with pushback from people who said they didn't want the story to be rushed, that everything should develop slowly, that this should be a slow burn throughout the series. And whenever I hear that, I get the same feeling one would get when you ask someone what they want for dinner and they say, "Oh, I'll just have plain bread, thank you." Now, I clown on you guys a lot because it's fun and I have this compulsive need to sabotage my career at every opportunity out of a trauma-induced fear of happiness and success, but you guys really don't know what you're missing sometimes. You really just want Amity to be gay panicking the entire show? You wouldn't want to see them be cute together or snuggle? And you know Luz would. You know she's a snuggler. Okay, let's get down to it. Here's where the problems begin. How many of you have actually been in a relationship before? For real, how many of you have been in a relationship and stayed in that relationship? Because I'd hazard a guess that it's not a lot of you. The idea that a relationship has tons of pining from a distance and all that prelude is the real meat of the story is one that immediately tells me that a person's experience with relationships in real life has only been pining and watching from a distance. People more experienced with relationships, or just managing to have at least one really good one in their lives, tend to have a different view of them entirely. Oftentimes the good relationships are the ones you didn't see coming. The ones that didn't have you pining over someone for months at a time. Take my fiance, Michaela Turkelson. We've been together for a year and a half and it's been an absolutely blissful experience, quarantine keeping us apart notwithstanding. It's been so good, in fact, that it's really hammered home how much of a hotbed of emotional abuse my last long-term relationship was. Do you know how much time passed between me realizing I had feelings for her and asking her out? 9 days. 9 days between the realization and asking her out, and that 9 days would have been shorter if I hadn't had to stop to think about whether these feelings were genuine or if I just wanted to return to a sense of normalcy after several months of severely traumatic incidents had upended my life. And that's some adults in their mid-20s. Teenagers work even faster than that, and it's not just because of the old boomer idea that teenage relationships don't last. Teenagers perceive time more slowly. A day feels longer to a teenager than it does to an adult. 3 months is a significant time for a 14-year-old, but for a 26-year-old, it's practically a blip on the radar. Teenagers live higher density lives. Their days are packed with more things to do on average than an adult often is. So even putting awkwardness aside, it won't take much time for something to happen. The only people who pine for years and never do anything about it are
Jerks online who want to debate!
I've always found that stories about couples staying together were more interesting than stories about couples getting together. But it has always seemed like I was in the minority on that front. I've had people argue with me that the build-up, the lead-up to a relationship that ends with them getting together is the really good part. And while that can sometimes be good if you're working with a character for whom confessing their feelings and talking about their feelings is difficult, it's not the only one. Once again, we come down to fandom culture believing there's only one way to write any story and rigidly sticking to it. This slow burn, enemies to lovers, sob story, redemption romance is the only thing a lot of these people care about. I've attributed the rise in ubiquity of this trope to the way in which younger creators have grown up in the world of fanfiction, but the way in which social media has made viewers' voices more easily heard has affected this as well. It's no wonder so many shows are so bland and samey. Audiences have actively demanded that they become bland and samey. I've watched people lament that Luz's relationships to other characters, the main central element of the Owl House, is getting in the way of the world building. Those jackasses at the round table are constantly trying to twist, warp, and mutate the Owl House into basically being a convoluted 47D chess anime or some shit. If creators aren't careful, their own fans will tear their works apart and burn it to pieces. And a lot of people are content to eat the same thing over and over and over again. Slow burn enemies to lovers is a trope unto itself that some people just cannot ever let go of, often to disgusting degrees. I've talked about how problematic the enemies to lovers trope can often be, and with Shadowlands on the horizon and Blizzard's contempt for women having been put on full display, I'll no doubt have to talk about it again at some point. But I want to talk more about the concept of a slow burn because it doesn't mean what you think it means. Slow burn is a relationship that develops over the course of the story. It's a major element throughout the entire arc and is always growing and being developed. That's the slow part. But the part people get stuck on is the burn. Think of it like a 100-hour candle. It burns slowly and takes a while to reach its end while giving off heat, light, and energy. However, in order to do any of that, the candle has to actually be lit. A relationship starting is not the candle reaching the bottom of its wick and burning out. A relationship starting is when the candle is lit. Relationships are packed to the brim with content to develop the relationship from the moment it starts, working through each other's baggage, problem solving, conflict resolution, hurt, comfort. A relationship is work. It will always be work. It's rewarding work, but it is still work. There's an episode of Friends where Monica and Chandler have a fight while they're on a weekend getaway together. By the end of it, Chandler is under the impression that this means that their relationship is over because they had a fight, and Monica tells him that isn't actually how relationships work.
So, I guess this is over.
What?
Well, you and me. I mean, it had to end sometime.
Why exactly?
Because of the weekend. We had a fight.
Chandler, that's crazy. If you give up every time you have a fight with someone, you'd never be with anyone longer than... Oh.
That kind of stuff is the element of a slow burn. They get together and their story isn't over. Getting together is just a new adventure. Writing an entire story about people getting together and then ending after they get together is like eating the crust off a sandwich and not touching the actually good part. You're missing out on so much when you do that. You know what? I'm gonna give you homework. I want you to find a story about a relationship that starts early and continues on throughout the story. I want you to read whatever that story is and then come back and tell me whether it was more satisfying or less satisfying than a dragged out pining fest followed by an abrupt ending. Could be a fanfic, a book, a TV show, anything you like, as long as it meets that criteria. Consume it, come back, and tell me about it. I've had people tell me that they decided to take my advice and get characters together quickly, and that it was more satisfying than pining. And I want to see whether or not people just need a kick in the ass to appreciate cute, healthy couples, or if there really is just no accounting for taste. Who knows? You might discover something about yourself. You might prove me wrong. Wouldn't that be an accomplishment?